Vodenje s posluhom.
Nova sezona Vodenja s posluhom se začenja spektakularno. Miha Škerlavaj, dobrodošel ponovno.
Dober dan.
In hvala, da si poskrbel, da se sezona začenja spektakularno.
Ja, to pa mislim, da bo res en spektakel.
Adam Grant je najin gost. Kdaj si prvič slišal zanj, v kakšnem kontekstu?
V bistvu 15 let nazaj smo se spoznali na konferenci. In Adam je z nami že od prvega podcasta, takrat je bil bolj kot vir in referenca, danes pa v živo.
Super, bo preveril, kaj govorimo o njem potem za nazaj. Welcome, Adam Grant. It is a huge pleasure to host you in our podcast. Miha was saying that he met you 15 years ago, and we kind of quoted you in the very first podcast that we had.
That's quite an honor and a little pressure.
Okay, but as far as I understood, you're trying to seek discomfort wherever you go. So how comfortable, uncomfortable, discomfortable do you feel right now in our studio?
Well, we'll find out. So far, so good. But there haven't been any especially challenging questions yet. So I hope to get more uncomfortable as we go.
That's kind of a pressure for us then.
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, we tend to do our best for the guests to feel comfortable. But now, when you raised it, we'll think of something.
Well,
yeah.
now that you mention it, I mean, you were talking about me in Slovenian, and I don't know what you were saying. So there's a little bit of,
Yeah,
I wonder what they're saying right now.
Point.
Yeah, but you're reading our body language, I guess. Miha, maybe we should try to kind of change the concept of the podcast and kind of bring the leaders that we're hosting into more uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, we will rethink our podcast.
And then no one will ever come as a guest.
Thanks, Adam, for giving us an idea. When I was mentioning leaders, you kind of claim that we fail as leaders if we fail to help other people realize their potential. So how can we do that as a leader?
I think there are so many things that leaders can do to help people realize their potential, and I hardly know where to start. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see too many leaders make is they hire people and then they decide how capable they are, and that's sort of the end of the story. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for people to grow. It also doesn't leave a lot of room for people maybe to figure out if there's a better role that they should be in. And so, I think if you're a star performer early, basically you get judged as high potential. If you don't succeed right away, we start to think, okay, you're not that talented, and maybe you're not going to do great things around here. And I think that does a real injustice to a lot of underdogs. It leaves a lot of people overlooked, and we could talk about how to overcome that. But I think as a leader, your first job is to recognize the potential in every single person you hire, and then ask, is there a role, is there a task, is there an environment where they could be successful? And if so, how do I create that?
How often do you have to do that? Is it like every single day or like once a year with this annual conversations that we still have in most Slovenian companies?
I think it probably depends on the context, but let me give an example of what that might look like. So I studied a company that makes tomato paste, and they're called Morningstar, and they've operated for over 3 decades without having formal bosses. And I went there because I just wanted to figure out, how do you possibly accomplish anything without a hierarchy? And they do a lot of weird things that I would not recommend to anyone I care about. But one thing they do that I think is clever and relevant to all of us is when you arrive at Morningstar, you're basically given the job description of your predecessor. And you're told you should do this for the first year because this person you replaced had figured out how to add value here. At the end of year 1, they give you an invitation to rewrite your own job description. And you can propose to do anything you want, but you have to meet 2 conditions. The first one is you have to explain how the job you want to do will better advance the mission than the one you did last year. The second is you have to go to the 5 to 10 colleagues that you're most interdependent with and convince them that this is better for the company, not just for you. And I think what they're doing is they're giving people permission to do what, Miha, you know well, Amy Resnetsky and Jane Dutton have called job crafting. The idea that most job descriptions were not written for individual employees. And we ought to become active architects of our jobs, to bring in strengths that are unused, to bring in passions that maybe are not part of our work. And I think the Morningstar practice is so powerful because it asks you to craft your job in ways that are not only enjoyable and meaningful for you, but also are going to serve the organization. And I think that's something that more leaders could sit down with their teams to do.
So Adam, it made me think, who is it, when you refer to they, who is they in a culture that has no bosses, right? Who gets to do the coordination of all these activities, and who is facilitating the organizational life?
Well, this was actually difficult to figure out because I walked in actually to Morningstar to record a podcast, and I said, we have some permission forms to sign. Who can authorize this? And no one knew because no one was in charge. But what they do is they have what they call a fluid dynamic hierarchy, where they ask people to identify tasks or situations where they want to lead. And then if they can demonstrate relevant expertise, they're given the leadership role for that meeting. Mm-hmm. But then that might rotate over the course of the day. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was an interesting experiment. I'm not sure it's for me.
I would try it. Yeah.
It is interesting, right? This form of shared leadership.
Wait, so Anya, how would you rewrite your job description?
I'm doing it every day, but I'm not writing because I'm a radio journalist. So I just go to my editor and said, listen, I'm going to do it that way. And next season, I'm going to do this and that. So I think that's one of the things I like most about my work. So I wanted to ask you, because we started, of course, with leaders, because this is podcast about leadership, and kind of leaders should recognize the hidden potential of their colleagues. But doesn't the whole idea really start within each individual employee? I would say that most people don't really realize their own hidden potentials. So how can we start?
Well, I think one of my favorite places to start comes from an experiment that my colleague Dan Cable did, where he looked at, this was in a multinational company. He wanted to know, how do we onboard people to help them see their own potential and also help others recognize what they're capable of? And in this experiment, there are basically three conditions. There's a control group that goes through kind of standard onboarding and socialization. There's then let's really learn the culture group, where you get to spend an hour understanding what's unique about the values and the norms so that you can fit in. And that turns out to not be particularly helpful for people. But there's a third condition where 6 months later, people are performing much better in their jobs, and they're also half as likely to quit. And so something is happening that's bringing out the best in them. And what they've been asked to do is they were asked to create a personal highlight reel. To imagine, Anya, I know you cover a lot of sports, like imagine you're going to take your whole career and put together the proudest moments, your greatest accomplishments, and share that with your new team. And doing that, I think, it helped people feel seen and valued for the things they could bring to the table. But it also was an eye-opening moment for the individual employee to say, I do have highlights. I may be new here, but I have something to offer. And I think this is such a great exercise. I think we should all have a personal highlight reel. I think we should also have a personal lowlight reel to learn from our failures as well as our successes, but that is another conversation.
I have this conversation with myself as a scholar quite often. We have all this smart and wise advice about what leaders should do and what they ought to do and so on. And a lot of the trouble and conversations that I hear from leaders is about their job being non-regenerative, right? So it's really, we are asking them all these things, assuming that they are quite, heroes that can do it all, take it all, and that it's for them to embody an organization. How does this advice that we are now sharing apply to the leaders themselves? How can they grow as leaders, as people, while growing others? How that's my dilemma that I have constant, this inner discussions about. Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that one.
Miha, you're the expert. I mean, you literally wrote the book about post-heroic leadership. So I'd love to hear your take.
Okay, tell us.
Yeah, it's ping pong, right? Bounced back. I think we should really make a good sort of effort in shaping the systems around people that assume a role, whether it's temporary or less temporary. But we should give them enough sort of resources and enough trust so that they can do their job. We should also think very carefully of who should get into those positions. And I love your take. Maybe you can share it with our listeners also about who do you like to see as leaders? So, ball back to you, Adam.
Okay, we're having some interesting game
Ping
going
pong.
on. I'll do a little bit of sport commentating now. Okay, Adam, it's your turn.
It's your turn. Tell us whether we score or not. I think one of the things that I think is saddest when it comes to who gets chosen as leaders is what's been called the Babel effect, which is the common finding that the person who talks the most in the meeting is the most likely to be chosen as the leader, even though that person is not more effective at leadership. And I think we end up mistaking their confidence for competence. And we assume because they're assertive and dominant, they must be highly skilled at guiding a group and providing direction and setting vision. And too often, those people are not only extreme extroverts, they're also narcissists who are very self-serving and they think it's all about me. So I obviously want to change that. I think that the person who's most qualified to lead is not the person who talks the most. It's the one who listens best. And I think listening is not just about paying attention to other people's words. It's about asking questions that challenge people to think differently. It's about inviting people to share their expertise and their dissenting opinions. And I think that, ultimately that is what servant leadership is all about. And I think we talk a lot about service and leadership. I think we have far too few leaders who practice it.
You also mentioned yesterday that one of the criteria through which you would choose people for leadership is that they do not want it, actually. Right?
This is such a paradox, right? Because the more you raise your hand and say, me, I want to be in charge, the more worried I am about your ability to be in charge. And I've done some research with Danielle Tussing and a group of colleagues where we show that leaders who are moderately reluctant, who have some hesitations about taking the reins or assuming the mantle, are actually more effective than leaders who are sure they want to do it, and also leaders who definitely don't want to do it. And what our data suggests is that when leaders have some concerns about being in power, they don't hog all the power for themselves. They're more likely to share it with others. They're more likely to empower their teams. And I think we probably all think of leaders who have said, you know what, I'm not sure I want this job. And that's when I become sure that they can do that job.
I would just like to go back to this word play that you have confidence versus competence. I think we have to find something like that in Slovenian, because this really sounds great, It's just so easy. Confidence, competence.
Fun part in this Dunning-Kruger studies were actually done also on a task where American students were asked to self-evaluate whether they can understand car driving instructions in written in Slovenian. If I'm not mistaken, Dunning's wife is of Slovenian origin, so that was we have a connection to this competence and overconfidence studies, the Mount Stupid and so on. So these are notoriously famous studies that actually got an alternative Nobel Prize a while ago, and still you can see them everywhere you look, I think, unfortunately.
Very, very unfortunately, the worse somebody is at a task, the more likely they are to overestimate their skill at that task, which is a great tragedy. But, I think that, just to go back to the idea of reluctance for a second, I think actually Plato knew this. If we look back a few thousand years, Plato said that the people best suited to govern are the people who don't want to govern. And also, if anyone is a Douglas Adams fan, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams made the exact same point. And I think anytime the ancient Greeks and the great modern British sci-fi writers agree, it must be true.
It's the answer is 42, right? Yeah.
So we all know it.
Life, the universe, and everything.
But we still have so many narcissists as our bosses and guiding us through these uncertain times. So can we now maybe move to the three words that are, in my opinion, most kind of connected to you still? Givers, takers, matchers?
I've been studying this for a long time. I found that all of us have a default style, a natural tendency that probably is influenced somewhat by our nature and somewhat by our nurture. Takers are people who are always asking, what can you do for me? Givers are the opposite. They want to know, what could I do for you? And matchers kind of live in the middle and say, I'll do something for you if you do something for me. I found that the best leaders are givers. That's what servant leadership is all about. It's saying, I will not let my ego get in the way of our mission. And I define my success as making other people successful. But a lot of people are afraid to be givers on their way up the hierarchy. They're afraid that they're going to get taken advantage of by takers, that they're going to get burned out because they overextend themselves. I think that's the hero complex, Miha, that you worry so much about. And most people decide, I'm going to play it safe by being a matcher. And that way, I won't be too selfish, but I also won't be too generous. But matchers end up making, I think, a systematic error, which is they are too transactional. Every interaction feels like almost like an accounting transaction. Like I have to keep score of the debits and the credits and make sure that we're all even. And so when they help other people, it's not appreciated the same way, right? I didn't do it because I care about you. I did it because I want something back from you. And I think the good news is on this, that although we have a default tendency, how we treat most of the people most of the time, we also get to make these choices in every interaction we have. So you could take your next meeting with your colleagues or your clients and say, okay, what do I want to do today? Do I want to ask for something? Do I want to offer something? Do I want to propose a trade? And if you shift those choices consistently throughout your day, your style of interaction will change.
That was a book that was such a big hit, 12 years ago, and we still talk about it, and it has had also an immense impact on the whole field of pro-social motivation and behavior. I wonder, if you would rethink your book these days. So if you were to write it today, seeing all the examples that sort of challenge maybe your learnings and your teachings, how would you approach it as Adam of 2025 instead of Adam of 2013?
There's so much I would rethink. I think in part because there's just been an explosion of research to really understand, I think, two questions. One is, what does it take to be a successful giver? And the other, which I think was almost completely overlooked in the book, and I should say was overlooked by me because it was my fault, is how do you build a culture of successful givers? I think it's one thing to try to make these choices yourself. It's another to say, I want to build an organization where everyone tries to lift others up instead of cutting them down. And I think we've learned an awful lot about how to do that. And I think probably the three big steps that I didn't understand well when I wrote Give and Take were, number one, from a selection perspective, it's actually not about hiring givers. It's about weeding out takers. Somebody said to me once that one bad apple can spoil a barrel, but one good egg does not make a dozen. I'm still trying to figure out what that means. But we know that bad is stronger than good, that if you put one extremely selfish person in a team, everybody else gets paranoid. And then the helpfulness, the collaboration, the generosity in the group drops. Whereas if you hire just one giver, you don't get everyone now helping. People are like, great, Miha will do all our work. And we can dump it all on him. Anya's very excited by this, right?
I'm having a good time, yeah.
So I think the selection part, if we can screen out the most selfish people, we're left with givers and matchers. And the givers will be generous because they don't have to worry about the takers. Matchers follow the norm. In the presence of givers, matchers give too, and we can shift the whole population just by getting rid of the takers. And then the other two steps, I think we actually have to reward generosity. So many companies, they say we want people to be helpful, we want them to be collaborative, and then they only measure individual results. And that's a recipe that incentivizes selfishness, right? I think that at least half of your performance review and your promotion should be based on, do you make the people better around you? Do you actually enhance the success of your teammates or of the organization, as opposed to just saying you mastered your individual job? And then the last part would be, we actually need a norm where people can ask for help, not just offer it. The best evidence I've read on this says that somewhere between 75 and 90% of all helping in workplaces starts with a request. There are not a lot of people saying, Anya, I'm actually bored this week. I have a lot of free time. how can I enrich your life and make your job better? Right? We're all too busy for that. Where helping starts is when I say, hey, I'm stuck, or I have a challenge. Can you possibly support me? But a lot of people don't ask because they're afraid. They want to be self-reliant. They don't want to be too vulnerable. They don't want to look helpless. And if you're a giver, you also don't want to be a burden to other people. But if nobody asks, no one will ever give.
That's why I asked Pia to help us. Thank you, Pia. I really appreciate your help. I'd just like to go back to successful givers. You're talking about how do we make sure that the givers can be successful and what kind of defines a successful giver. And very quickly you said something like givers burn out. Can you tell us a bit more about that? So is it like really a serious threat that the givers go into the direction of burnout?
It is, but it's also an avoidable problem. It turns out to be somewhat straightforward to solve. So I think there are 3 mistakes that we have good evidence for that the givers make that cause burnout. They try to help all the people all the time with all the requests. And pretty soon you get a reputation for being, good at your job and also willing to say yes. And no good deed goes unpunished. Everybody wants something from you. You have just an endless list of requests, and you start falling behind on your own responsibilities, then you start losing sleep, and you get exhausted. I think that the givers have to learn to set boundaries. And what that means is being thoughtful about who you help, how you help, and when you help. The who is about saying, if somebody has a history or reputation of selfishness, I am not going to spend as much time supporting them. Don't reward takers for being takers. And the great thing about helping givers and matchers is they pay it forward and pay it back. And you're in a better position then to make sure that you're also supported. And then the how is about saying, I'm not going to just help in every possible way. I'm going to find a few ways of giving that I enjoy and excel at so that it's energizing and I'm adding unique value instead of just, being somebody that can be substituted for easily. And then the when is about recognizing that you have to block time to advance your own goals and priorities in your calendar. And you may dedicate separate time where you're available for other people, but you're also protecting your ability to succeed.
That's why you're doing podcasts at 8 in the morning.
Yes. I had nothing to do with that. That was all Miha.
Okay, Miha.
I'll take the blame.
And the credit.
We'll see about the credit yet. So how does that apply to yourself? Let's say that you would be the person to take in your own advice, right? So I remember already 15 years ago there were people queuing up and you have not written a single book. I imagine the demands on your personal time are just incredible. How do you live up to your own advice? That's what I wonder.
I try to give this advice often so that I remember to take it. So I think for me, what this looks like is actually my wife, Allison, is constantly saying, why are you helping that person? They only contact you when they want something from you. And that has made me a little bit more careful about who I try to support. And I've tried to actually scale back if I think somebody might be a taker, but instead of just not helping them, because I believe that not everyone will change, but people are capable of change. What I will often do is I'll ask them to help me help someone else that I'm trying to support. And then that's kind of a test to see, are they willing to step up? And I've tried to be really clear about the ways that I can add value. So I don't like mentoring a lot. I don't like mentoring a lot of people. It's very time consuming. And I feel like the opportunity cost is high. That the time I spend with one person could potentially support a lot of other people. And so I will only mentor basically our PhD students at Wharton. And if other people ask, let them know I'm really sorry, but my time belongs to my students, and that's where my responsibilities are. And that makes it a little bit easier to set that boundary. But then I still want to be helpful. And the two ways that I love to help are sharing knowledge and making connections. And so what I'll let people know is, look, if you have a question, I'm happy to try to answer it or point you to someone who is better qualified than me to help you out. And so I end up making a lot of introductions. I share a lot of recommendations for books and podcasts and journal articles to read. And I hope that that's a good substitute. And that for me is kind of, it's time-bound a little bit. So Paul Graham wrote a great essay years ago on what he called maker days and manager days, where he said, look, we all have parts of our job that are creative, that are problem solving, and then we have other parts of our job that are, kind of administrative. We're, having meetings, we're answering emails, we're organizing. And he said, those are different frames of mind, and we should separate them. And so I try to have maker days where there's nothing on my calendar. I'm writing, I'm reading, I'm analyzing data, I'm hopefully doing my best creative thinking. And then I usually have 2 days a week that are dedicated to trying to be helpful to other people. And knowing that those are separated makes it a lot easier for me to balance them.
As far as I understood, you're not a huge fan of a 5 days working week. So how many days a week do you work?
6.5. I think that's gotten better over time. I think when we had kids, that became a forcing function to say my most important priority is to be a good dad to my children. And so, what I do most days is I start working when our kids leave for school. I stop when they come home. And then, if I need to catch up on something after they go to bed, I will.
Yeah, you also spoke about, if I may share, a little bit about integrating, right, this personal and professional life. Is this something that you think applies to other professions as well, or is it more unique to what the two of us are doing?
I think it applies everywhere. So my colleague Nancy Rothbard has studied people's preferences for integration versus segmentation. So integrators are people who they have pictures of their family all over their office. They invite their colleagues and maybe even their boss over for dinner. And they're very happy to blur the lines between work and other parts of their life. Segmenters are the opposite. They like to have a real border and say, look, my work and my home life are separate. And Nancy finds that segmenters actually have higher well-being than integrators because they're better at setting the kinds of boundaries we've been talking about. And I think there's something to be learned from that. However, they often miss out on the rewards of meaningful relationships that cross boundaries. And so I think that, for me, my greatest collaborations have been with people who are, now close to my wife and kids, not just to me. And I've been starting to think a little bit more about how do we do that integration. I think for leaders, that is one of the ways that you humanize yourself, right? Is you talk about your family. Maybe you occasionally will bring them to work. You invite people into your home life. And I think that, I don't know, I'm curious, what are the Slovenian norms around how much segmentation is expected?
I would say we are slightly more towards integrators, right? Would you have this same impression?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Although I would say that maybe like outside of Ljubljana, if I think of Nova Mesta, for example.
Even more than, right?
I would say that they're more segmenters.
And yet again, right, in the, let's say, relatively smaller communities, you meet same people in different roles. So I wonder if, it's maybe just the modality of how you integrate is different. So.
Yeah. That's.
I don't know. It's a good question,
well,
really.
Okay,
that's a good perspective as well. Yeah. Okay.
In Ljubljana, if it's more skewed toward integration, how far does that go? Like, would you go on a holiday or vacation with your coworkers?
Maybe a weekend getaway or something.
Not a whole week.
Not a whole week. Or maybe skiing, holidays. That's popular.
I do think it happens. It happens, yeah. So probably a bit larger chunk of a day would be dedicated to work, and that means also that a lot of your personal connections would be tied to that. I don't know. I mean, I also like to speak more from the evidence than from impressions, but those are the impressions that I got over.
Yeah.
It's a study waiting to be done.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a great topic to...
We'll get Anya into the PhD program. So
There we
Yeah,
go.
thank you.
You know what you were signing up for.
You'll see absolutely no pictures of my family in my office, but you'll see posters of top athletes. So
There we go. Who's your favorite athlete?
Jan Oblak, the goalkeeper of Slovenia national team.
Mm-hmm.
I have quite a few posters of him.
Have you interviewed
very
him?
Professional. Yeah. Okay. Just maybe to conclude, we have a couple of minutes left. We have to talk a bit about AI, I would say.
Did ChatGPT tell you to ask that? What question should I ask? You should ask about AI. For sure.
No, I was checking with Miha. I'm not sure if it's still your favorite topic. No, I was just wondering if you think that AI could be a giver in an organization.
Wow. Never thought about that before. You know, I think I'm torn on this one because I think we've already figured out how to get a lot of help from AI tools, right? And a lot of people have been able to delegate menial, boring tasks. Many people have started treating AI tools as their thought partners to get creative ideas, to get feedback on drafts. I don't know, though, that AI could be a giver because part of my definition of being a giver is not just helping others, but the motivation behind it, which is caring about others. I don't care how large your language model is. Machines can't care. And so I think that AI can maybe mimic some of the speech and actions of a giver, but I think because the care isn't there, no.
Miha?
I'll share a story from a healthcare setting. And I'll get to the point later. But the story is that there was a manager who shared this at the conference, that there were a lot of people complaining about the scheduling, right? So that was her role. And as they have 24/7, of course, there will be always some people that will feel, that this is unfair towards them. You don't like them as much. So she said, okay, we'll ask ChatGPT to do it. And that has been working well for a while. But at certain point in time, they started to anthropomorphize the machine, right? So they started to complain to the ChatGPT that she does not like them, and that she is unfair to them, and all that. So I really am very eager and keen to see how will this dance between the machine and human continue to evolve.
I am too. I think it's, in some ways, I worry that, when I spend time with the founders and leaders of the big AI companies, they think it's a good idea to anthropomorphize the tools they're building. Because they want people to feel a stronger connection to them, and I think that's dangerous. I think that we need to recognize that these are just prediction engines, right? They're just using a lot of data to try to anticipate what the next word is that would complete a sentence or answer a prompt. And our brains do some of that too. We are prediction engines in a sense, but we're more than that. I think that when I was writing Hidden Potential, I think that one of the things that was really striking to me is we used to think basically that our job was to distinguish humans from animals. And we thought that was all about cognitive skills, right? Because we have superior brain power. But now that machines have caught up and in many ways surpassed, I think it's true that cognitive skills are what distinguish us from other animals, but it may be that our character skills are what differentiate us from machines. I don't think we should ever rely on an AI to tell us what the most important values are to adopt in a workplace, in a family, in a society. And I think anybody who believes that's a good idea is asking for trouble.
Here to that. I've also, I would like to pick up on a story that you shared in Think Again, where you almost invented Facebook, right? So can you tell us a bit more about this story? And in combination with that, what do you think about this rule now in China where they are actually demanding people to be experts in the field in order to comment the field?
Well, this is a test of friendship. Your real friends remind you of your failures. Thank you for refreshing that memory, Miha. No, I think it's fair because I put it out there and shared it, and I have always learned a lot more from my failures than my successes. So I'm very happy to discuss. So when I was a senior in high school applying to college. I grew up in Michigan in the Midwest U.S. and I was planning to stay in state for college like most of my classmates were doing. And I woke up one morning in September having had a dream that I went to Harvard. I never thought of applying before. And I decided, you know what? What's the harm? I filled out the application, and to my great surprise and delight, I got in. I didn't know anyone who went to Harvard. I'd literally never met someone who went there except for my interviewer the month before. And I was afraid that I wasn't going to have any friends. So I went to the state-of-the-art technology at the time. It was America Online. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was a very early online platform that had chat rooms and profiles you could search. And I logged in and I searched for Harvard class of 2003. And I found a few people. And we started emailing back and forth. And one of them was a coder for fun, and he created a little email listserv. And every week we started finding new classmates, and we added them to the list. And by the time we got to campus in the fall, we had connected more than an eighth of the entering Harvard freshman class. And then we arrived in Cambridge, and we shut down our online social network because we all lived, within a kilometer of each other. We don't need to communicate over the internet anymore. And then 5 years later, Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook in the house next door to me. And his older sister, Randy, lived in my house and was a fellow psychology student. And, just looking back on that, I think I made a bunch of mistakes. I assumed that online interaction was only for people who were separated by distance. I assumed that what we created was only interesting for college students. I assumed I was a student, not an entrepreneur. And I think if I had rethought those assumptions, it's possible we would have built something. I don't think I ever would have had the vision for what Facebook became. But okay, Miha, you asked a question about China's requirement that now, if I want to comment, I need to be an expert. Oh, it's so complicated. I'm not a fan of regulating speech. I am a fan of valuing expertise. So for me, shutting down people's ability to contribute to a conversation if they haven't proven their knowledge is a problem. I think we're, one, stifling people's voices, but two, we're also missing out on the value of a beginner's mind, right? How many great ideas have come from somebody who is actually not an expert and therefore doesn't take for granted the assumptions that we need to question. So I think that's a missed opportunity for learning. I do think it would be interesting to experiment with credibility scores on the internet, where, when I post about a topic, we can ask people essentially to rate the accuracy of what I've shared. And then instead of saying, Adam is an expert, they should say Adam has an expert rating in organizational psychology, but you should definitely not listen to him about finance or about art or about music because his opinions there are very ignorant. I'd love that.
So maybe there's a middle ground, right? So the algorithms do that already now. So instead of, sort of stimulating your dopamine, the criteria could be that you give more space and time to the qualified commenters, right? You don't shut down the beginner's mind, but then still you give priority to those that have the skill set to actually say something qualified.
I think that would be ideal. I think that, the famous saying is that freedom of speech doesn't guarantee freedom of reach. And I do think we ought to build systems that amplify quality, not just that amplify emotions.
Definitely. It's a huge task that we all have, right? Just have to stop here, I guess, because you have to do something else during the day today. So, Adam, I have to say I'm really pleased that you didn't succeed with your Facebook and that you do what you do, because it's really a pleasure reading your books and listening to your podcasts. And thank you so much for being our guest.
Well, it's been a real privilege to be here. Thank you both for having me.
Thank you, Adam. Dream come true.
Miha needs to have bigger dreams, I think, is what we've learned.
Vodenje s posluhom.